Okay, in the last video, we just finished this. We had a time series. We created a time series here. And now we do exactly the same thing that we did here for the new orders. So we're going to do exactly the same thing here. Go down here, and finally we get what we call the DGO time series. We had the ER time series in the last video, and now we have the DGO one. And then of course we're going to do just the same thing again for the consumer sentiment. So we get here, we start with get symbols, and we use this, and then we develop this one, the time series for consumer sentiment. And yep, same thing. And then finally we do it for new homes sold here. So again, we do the same thing. We use this symbol for new homes sold, and we end up with this one. So now we have 4 separate time series objects or variables and data sets or indices. And then next thing is we just combine them together using column bind. Now let's just check that just to see what that's like. So I look at cbind here, and we can see that it takes a sequence of vector, matrix, or data frames. So we have data frames, right? Each one of ours. No, I'm sorry, they're vectors or matrices. Actually, I made a mistake. So they're vectors. So we're using the cbind function with these vectors. So they are vectors. They're also time series. So it's like a little bit of a modified vector, but I guess it treats them. They are vectors actually, and so you can put them into functions that require vectors, and so it says the arguments should be matrices or vectors, in our case vectors. So we run this here, and we combine these 4 time series, and then if we check what we get, which we call this here economic MTS, if we check the structure of that here, we get that it's a multiple time series object, okay, which I guess is basically like a matrix with some extra stuff. And now if we look at the this economic MTS, we see that it is a matrix, and we see that here are the first 6 rows of this matrix, and these are the columns which are the time series. And here we see that we have NAs here, a lot of NAs, and why is that? Because this data wasn't being collected as early as this data was. So this data starts back, I think, in 1948, and this wasn't being collected back then. So these are empty. If we do this, we get the dimensions of this. It's 803 rows by 4 columns. And if we want to look at the dim names, see if I can. I see that dim names is a is a list, and the first is null, and the second contains the names of these time series. So the next thing he does is he renames the names of these to make them look a little bit simpler. So he accesses the second element of this list with this, and remember that if there are 2 of these here, 2 of these square brackets, then we get back a vector, and so we can replace that vector with this vector. If we did just with 1 set of square brackets, we would get back a list, and this wouldn't work, I don't think. But since we're returning a vector and replacing that vector with this vector, this works. So now if we do that again here, now that these have been replaced. By the way, there's one interesting thing that you should know, and that is, suppose you do a command like I just did dim names. You don't have to type the whole whatever this is here. So I can type in EC, and then I'm going to hit the tab key. When I hit the tab key, I get this. I get a choice of whatever starts with, what other objects are available that begin with EC. Now I'll just hit enter, and then I can hit enter again. I get that. So it makes it typing much easier. Okay, and so after he does that, then we want to get rid of all the records that have any NAs in them. So we saw that the first few records had a lot of NAs in them. Here, right? These are all NAs. So any record that has any NA in it, we want to get rid of that. So we use this NA omit on this, and he calls that the modeling MTS. So this is the economic MTS, and then he distinguishes that, or creates something called the modeling MTS to have something we can work with, because we can't put this kind of thing with lots of NAs in it, or actually with any NAs in it, into most of the modeling that we want to do. Like if you put it into any database algorithm, data mining algorithm, the data mining algorithm, most of them won't work. So if you do that, I think if you put it into even regression, it won't work. So we have to clean it up, and that means getting rid of any, in this case, getting rid of any records that have any NAs in them. So let's try that. And let's look at the head. Let's try that typing trick again. So I had to do that, then I'll do tab, and then I'll do tab again, and then I'll do enter. Okay, so now we can see that there aren't any NAs, at least not in this portion of the of this matrix. Okay, so now we've prepared it for modeling.